Hey YouTube, how are you guys doing today? In today's video, we're going to be talking about age and it just being a number. So before we get started, I hope that you guys are all doing well. I want you to comment below how old you are and how old you feel. And I also would like to make a note that if you're uncomfortable with commenting how old you are, just comment how old you feel. I'm very curious to hear your answers. So you guys, in today's video, we're going to be talking about age, society's expectation of age, and pretty much breaking down the feelings that we have behind age. So, to get started, I would like to note a story about my great grandmother that goes way, way back to my childhood. So, my great grandmother passed away this year at the age of 101. And growing up, I always remember my grandmother not acknowledging her actual age. So at the time, I can remember I was probably about 5 years old and she was about 81. And I was like, Great grandma, how old are you? And she's just like, Oh, sweetie, she's like, I'm not a day over 45. And I was like, Nah, but like, how old are you really? And she was like, I just told you. And I would ask her the same thing every year, and she would tell me the exact same thing. I'm not a day over 45. So one day I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, like, how old's your grandma? And then he's just like, Oh, she's like 85 years old at that point in time. And I'm like, is she aware of her age? Or like she keeps saying she's not a day over 45. And he looks at me, he starts laughing, and he says that when I was growing up, she used to say the exact same things. He was like, now mind you, when I was around your age, she was probably in her 60s and 50s at that point. But as she got older, she kept saying the same thing. So when I was younger, I was thinking, like, why isn't she acknowledging her age? But when I got older, I finally understood it. And something that's deep and amazing is that the fact that she was saying this to herself mentally, her body physically and mentally never aged in accordance with the age that she actually was. So she may have been in her 80s at the time, but physically she looked like she was in her 60s. And mentally, she had a mind that was sharp for someone that may have been in their 40s or 50s. So I thought that it was so interesting that she didn't believe her actual age, or she didn't put it out there that's how old she actually was. In spirit and in heart, she was saying to herself, I wasn't a day over 45, and she actually lived in that way. So that made me look a little bit deeper at the aspects that we have of age mentally, like how are we looking at ourselves as we're getting older? Are we seeing it as aging with grace, or are we seeing it in an alternate way? When we're getting older, are we seeing ourselves as growing wiser, learning more, or are we dreading it and seeing it as getting closer to death? So I think that it's really important to think about the aspects that we view ourselves mentally when it comes to age, and not forgetting too that it's just a number. I think that oftentimes we get caught up and we think that aging is something that's bad, when it's just like, however old you feel, embrace it. And in reality, like I said, it's just a number, so you can do anything you want to do or act any way that you want to act, as long as you're growing wiser, but not, not losing that kid at heart, always keeping that as you're aging. So I wanted to talk about society's viewpoint behind aging, which I think this is very interesting because I feel like when you're younger, like when you're a kid, it's seen as, oh, you're growing older, and when you're a teenager, it's something that becomes fun. The last birthday that I think is the major one, which would be 21. And then you'll hear some people say, like, oh yeah, after 21, all other birthdays are downhill. And it's almost like society, Western society in general, they see birthdays or getting older as something that's dreadful, as something that's getting closer to death. I'm not talking about everyone, but I'm just saying Western society as a whole, they don't see aging as something that's positive. So I feel like breaking down and separating from that societal viewpoint and then honing into your own viewpoint to say, okay, how do I want to view aging? And I think that aging is something that's powerful and that's amazing. I think that you're growing wiser with each year, and I think that every year should be celebrated. Every year holds something different. Your life is going to be changing in ways that only you know and that you can fathom, but I think that it's something that shouldn't be dreaded. So I think when you break away from that, life becomes something that's exciting when you start to look at aging. I think that changing your narrative is so important because all is mental. If you're looking at each year and your birthdays as something positive, that's what it's going to be. If you say to yourself, age is just a number, you're never going to lose your kid at heart, you're never going to lose that joy that you have, you will always have that. If you start to look at age as something that's awful, something that you're dreading, something that, like, you're going to be old and you're going to start having creaks in your bones, you know, you may start to manifest that in your life. Now, I want to say that there are things and certain changes that you will have with each age that cannot be changed. You know, there's some things that will happen, you know, for instance, when you reach a certain age and you're an adult, you're going to have to start paying bills. So of course, there are the circumstantial things that are going to be changing that will happen regardless of how you're viewing yourself mentally. But I do think that knowing how you're looking at yourself is extremely important. Embracing, right? Instead of dreading. So, you guys, I wanted to drop that because I feel like, you know, aging is something that's so interesting, but I just want to know, how do you guys do it? And I wanted to drop some information as well. So please like, subscribe, and drop your comments down below. Peace.